Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll now. So most of you here are teachers. You seem to be very new with PM and you're interested in interventions and SIA analysis for grading and instructional strategies. So I'll probably cover those first. And if there's something else at the end that you're interested in me going over, please let me know. If you have any questions, if I'm going too fast, feel free to unmute and ask. Okay, so go ahead and log into PM so you can follow what I'm covering. Okay, so I am impersonating a teacher at the moment. So when you log into PM and you click around and you want to go back to your dashboard, you're looking at your dashboard, right? So immediately it will take you to your dashboard. If you want to get back there, you can always click Performance Matters and it'll take you back there. Okay, so what I'm sharing right now is a teacher view. So your view is probably similar to this, but for your students. Sorry. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to walk you through what you see here. First, before we start going into the reports, I want to point out news and assignments. Click on that and you'll see video tutorials. So if you have more questions after this, feel free to come here to find tutorials. There's a lot here and it's sectioned off by an overview, what's on my dashboard, baseball cards. If there's more videos, you can toggle over. These are short videos, like 5 minutes, 3 minutes long. Student IM analysis scoreboard. So there's a lot here. What I want to show you as well is online testing. These are good videos to show your students, especially this first one, student video about online testing. It has a video for text-to-speech, right? There were a lot of questions about how to use text-to-speech. I'll go over that as well. But when you click and open this, you could share this link to your students and they should be able to view it as well. Okay, so some of these videos are a bit outdated. The text-to-speech tool has newer functions, so I definitely want to cover that at the end. If I forget, feel free to ask me to review it. Okay, and then there's also recorded webinar series. These are a bit longer. They're about 30 minutes to an hour. That gives you strategies on how to use these reports. Okay, so that's worth reviewing as well. Okay, so that was my dashboard. You can click on Performance Matters, it'll take you there, and news and assignments. And as you're coming in, make sure you mute yourself just to eliminate background noises. And then shared reports is if your admins create a report for your campus or your district and they share it with you, you'll see it populate here. But what you'll probably use the most is the students tab. Okay, so you can filter, this is all your students. You can filter by your course here. You can filter by the tests that they've taken in PM, or you can filter by their indicators, their attributes, like students with disability. If you click on it and you'll see all your students with disability. You can click on demo mode and that'll take you like if you're on here with parents or other students or other staff members even, you can go to your initials and click demo mode and it'll hash out names, okay? So students with disability, if you're interested in students with disability and maybe early warning indicators, you can click on both. There's a check mark. So you're only viewing those students with both of these attributes. LAP are the English proficiency indicators for your students. So you can filter according to their attributes, gifted and interventions, students with interventions. Okay. You can search your students too by name. Or you can click on this test where it currently says hide. That's the default. If you click on show, then you'll see all of the tests that they've taken in PM, their scores and the standards that they were tested in. Okay, so the color coordination here is based on performance bands. The red are your below expectation does not meet, right? The yellow is approaching, the green is meeting, and the blue is exceeding expectations. If I'm too fast, or if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask me. So if you hover over those, you'll see the numbers of standards, the total number of questions that covers all those standards, and the percent of question total that they've been tested for, and they've gotten in a meet indicator for those standards. You can also hover over each test and you can see their score, the class average, the school average, and the district average. So this is just a quick place to view your students' performances. Okay, it doesn't give you everything. It can give you a bit more if you select a specific test. And then you'll see a summary similar to what you would see in a student item analysis. And I'll show you the student item analysis as well. But this is just a quick place for you to see a summary of how your students perform. The students here is your students who've taken this test. School is the average of all students who've taken this test at your school. And the district is a summary of all students that's taken this test in your specific district. Okay, not all of Harmony, just your district. Okay, so it's a quick graph to see how your students are performing against everyone else in their school and against your district. And again, this is very similar to what you would see in SIA. You could hover over the standards that they're tested on, the attributes for the test, for this specific test. There's the multiple choice and then the standards. So it depends on the test. Some tests have more attributes than others, how many items are tested for that standard. And then how the numbers of students perform for each standard. So you could toggle to order their performance levels by percent. You could toggle according to performance bands. So right now the blue one is checked, right? So if I check on blue, this is my percent of students who exceeded expectation across these standards. I can toggle to see. Yes, is there a question?
Yes, there is no student interface, right? So we have teacher interface only. So student cannot look in to see their how well they did it and what they missed. They can't do that because
yes, they can.
They can.
Yeah, so if you click on a specific student, you'll see their student detail card. This is what they see in their portal. This is the student parent portal. So when they sign into PM, like how they would test through the Harmony portal, and if they click student portal instead of online testing, it'll take them here. So this is what they see. Okay. And I'll get back to how to do this because we'll review it in SIA. But this is the student detail card. The attendance is now active. So some of these things are new. The early warning indicator is working as well. This particular student doesn't have any. But the attendance, absent by teacher or unexcused, all of that would populate here. Their schedule is here and their grades. The grades are coming, the discipline is coming. So these two cards will get populated eventually. So basically, we're pulling information in Skyward and putting it into PM. And I don't think we're doing away with Skyward. A lot of people have been asking me that too. It's just that we're pulling it from Skyward so that you have it all in one platform. But there's more that Skyward does, like scheduling, that we still need. So the students can click test results to see their common assessments that they've taken on PM. Okay, the state assessment, and it looks blank, but that's not true. All they have to do is click show all scores, and then you can see their scores on their state assessments. And additional scores are all the additional schools that we're pulling into PM, like NWEA state results and even Schoology grades as well. Okay, so these are all their Schoology grades. It's getting populated in PM, and they can view those things here. And you guys can view these things here too, so that it's all in one platform. You can see the standards that they've been tested in PM and how they perform. So the red one here are most likely the SLOs. And so, that's probably why there's a lot of reds, because your students who've taken SLOs would definitely perform lower than expectations. Any interventions they may have, the student doesn't have any, so it would populate here. So let me go back to the test results. You could view the report. This is what students can see. So if you're in a student or parent conference, you could also pull up the student detail card and show them how that particular student performed against the class, the school, and the district. You could click this toggle to populate by standard. Okay, so this is what students and parents can see. Any more questions about the student detail card? And they click that same icon in their portal, but instead of going to online testing, they can go to student portal. And it'll take them here. But from here, you can also go back to click Performance Matters. It'll take you back to the dashboard. Okay, so let's go back to this summary here that is in your dashboard in the student tab. It works very similar to the SIAs. You could toggle the performance band. So if you're interested in how well your students are performing or which TEKS that they're not. And then if you click on the numbers inside these color bands, it'll select out those students. So for instance, for this standard, 31 of your students did not do so well, while 54 did. So maybe you decide not to do a whole class review, just a small group review with those particular 31 students. So you can click on it and then you can see those particular students. So this is a good way of just performing groups on the spot while you're in class. Okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I missed how you got that on your dashboard.
Oh, yes. So you go to your dashboard, click student, you select out a test. And when you select out a test, you'll see a summary of it. SIA, the student item analysis. So as teachers, most of you here are teachers. So you'll probably use student item analysis and baseball card the most. Student item analysis looks similar to this, but there's way more that you can do there. And we will get to that. Okay, so this landing page here, your My Dashboard, is just a quick summary. If you wanted to do something, it's a quick way to access. So if you wanted to form small groups or something like that, this is a good place to do it. But if you want to look at particular grades or deeper analysis, go into student item analysis. And when you click inside, like let's say these 6 students, you want to isolate out those 6 students so that you can do a quick tutorial, after school tutorial with those 6 students in that standard. You can click on those buttons. If you keep clicking, it'll further isolate those students. So these are these filtering up here. You can X out of it, or click all, and it'll show all of your students. All right, any other questions?
I have a question. Can you tell me what the early warning indicators are? And can you tell me how to put a paper test into Performance Matters where it shows your data?
The early warning indicator is new. And when you, let's say, click on a student that has that tag there, it'll show up here. So for this particular student, their attendance rate is less than 90%. And these are all the absences. So that's why there's an early warning indicator for this student because of all of these absences. And this became active, you probably haven't even noticed, this became active just a few days ago. This particular student has 5+ absences for semester 1, year to date is less than 90% in your class. You eventually see the discipline and the grades across all courses for your students as well, hopefully by next week. And then for the paper test, we'll get to that in SIA. Any other questions about my dashboard before I move away? Okay, let's go to intervention because a lot of you will probably do tutorials and other types of interventions with your students. So go to intervention, click new. And here I've gotten a lot of tickets about this. You need to save often. Each step, make sure you're saving, okay? So interventions title, let's say after school tutorials, it has to be 10 characters or more. Category, let's say I'm a science teacher, program, after school tutorials. The scoring tool is the only student tracking that's available. And then you can set a baseline and a goal for this group of students. So let's say you're pulling out students who are making 50% and your goal is 70% for them to pass. Points is for some of the tests they take might be by point based and not percent based. So let's just say 0 to 100 to cover all of it. Then your tiers, so if it's an after school program, it might be just a tier 1 student. So that's basically your gen ed students that you're pulling out, group size, maybe 7 to 10, your frequency, maybe weekly on Monday, multiple days if you want, and then change the duration, maybe an hour after school. Okay, and then you can save here or click over to properties. Your name will populate, or if you want to add a different interventionist, you could do that here. The area, academic or behavioral type of interventions, and then you could backtrack this to the beginning of the year, and then maybe the end of the semester, and then you can duplicate this for the second semester. So let's say subject, your focus, maybe grading, CDAs, a rationale. You can also put your standards here too, just so that maybe these are the group of students that perform low in a specific standard, and that's why you're getting them together. So if you know the standards code, you just type it in and you could multiple select.
I have a question on those standard codes. Where do we find that cheat sheet kind of like?
Well, you could find the standards under items, standards explorer, and for the Texas ones here. And then you're right that there's multiple standards, right? So there's the Texas teams, and then there's also different years. So when you're selecting standards, make sure you're paying attention to the years. It does get confusing. So like, let's say I'm a science teacher. Here are the 2020 standards for those different grades. But then if you look down science here, there's 2017 standards. So the coding system might be different for those different years.
And is it going to have all the TEKS?
Most of them, if we don't have like the tech apps courses, we don't have all of those tech apps courses. So if there is a TEK that you need, you can put in a ticket and a request and see if we can add those. Right, so I've saved this intervention. The next thing you want to do is add students. You don't see students here. So click add student. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and do a student filter review. And this is when you click on student filter, this is what you see for all of the reports. Okay, so let's say you want to filter by class. So especially if you're a virtual teacher, you probably have tons of courses, right? And you want all these students into one. The way PM does it is not that user-friendly because it does it by, so you have to click on geographical and let's say course type. And what you'll see are these numbers, which is not user-friendly for us. But if you click through, so this teacher actually has a clean schedule. Some, like, especially your virtual teachers have a ton of sections here, but you can click on your student to see if these are the correct students. So if maybe you have multiple sections and they actually should be combined, click both of them, check your students and make sure that they're there. And then you can create new filters so that you don't have to do this again. Okay, so I'm just going to call this virtual school. Again, it has to be 10 characters or more. So maybe this is my virtual school 8. A, B section or something. Click save. Save, you'll see the filter here. Okay, so then you won't have to redo this. So once I click on this filter, you can see these are the two sections and these are the students. And this student filter, you'll see again in other places in PM. So you just do it once, check your students to make sure they're exactly where you want them to be, and then hit apply. Right, so then you can see the filters created, and now I could search for a student by their name, and then I can click all the students that I want. So I'm just going through, and you can do them all at once. And hit OK. And then you can see them here, and make sure you click save. Save often. I think a lot of teachers weren't clicking save, and then you add a bunch of attendance and grades, and then you lose it all. Okay. Select it. Save. And then the next thing is you might want to change the properties. So right now, inherent properties is checked. You can expand to see what we created. So this is basically what we said over here. And if you want to change it for a particular student, you can. So you just uncheck here, and then you could change interventionist, change the time. The more uniform this is, the easier it is for you to add the data. Right? The more changes you make per student, the harder it'll be for you to add data to this intervention. So I would suggest just creating a new intervention maybe, right? If you're going to start changing time and stuff like that. It's up to you. So change maybe the student in this intervention is meeting on different days. Is, that make recording this information a bit more difficult. Right? So plan ahead how you want to group your students. The baseline here, that can be different, I guess. Maybe the student is passing, but he really wants to get a B. Right, and then click save. Okay, whatever changes you make, save. Okay. And then there are these tabs that you could click on. Progress Monitor is adding grades. So adding Performance Matters tests. You click on test title, and these are the tests that these particular students have taken in PM. So if you want to have more of a whole child approach to your intervention, then click them all. If you want to narrow it down to specific CBA, specific course, then click only those, and then scroll down to the bottom and click add results. Okay, make sure you scroll down and add results. Go ahead and save again. And then what you see here for this student is he's taken all these tests in PM. Okay, so it's connecting the dots, and then it's giving you a linear regression line. Right, so this is the average of all of these tests, not of a particular subject. It's just all of them, math, ELA. So it kind of gives you an idea of how your student is performing overall. And then you can add manual entry too. So maybe this after school program, you're doing do nows or exit tickets. I think this might have to be long. Then change the date. I think a lot of teachers are forgetting to change the date, and then it gets lost. So make sure you pay attention to the dates. Scoring tool, we only have the one tracking our students. And then instead of percent, you can add points if you want. And then, you just type in the points, whatever that may be. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and add a bunch here. Add results, and then you see it populate. So now I have a percent for all the PM tests that they've taken and points, the one that I've just added here. There's also a toggle at the bottom here. If you click on it, it'll disappear. So for the local test, the PM test, you click on this and you can see your baseline here and your goal.
Yeah.
ahead and add another manual entry. It's any questions so far?
I have a question. When you are adding in, I guess, minutes or students, how do you go back and find where you can track the number of minutes they've done so far for the month or for the semester or for the day, even if they're meeting with another interventionist like math versus ELA?
You will do that in reports and maybe under baseball card. I can show you that after we're done with these intervention. For a total of minutes. Okay, so right now I'm doing progress monitors, which is grade based. So then I've added two manual entry and the points are connected because now there's more than one. You can also add comments in that earlier. You could put a comment on the side. I didn't do it. So maybe so these the students will be able to view, right? So maybe add as many comments as. But once you're done with the progress monitor, click on attendance to add the minutes of when you're meeting these students. So click new meeting and if you change these minutes here, it will change for each student. So that might get a bit confusing if they're all different, right? But if they're all the same, it makes it easier. And I think a lot of teachers are clicking add meetings right away and not checking the date. And then it'll save on top of your old ones. Okay, so make sure you check the dates. You could select the students. I've seen some teachers select some students and not others. It just makes logging difficult if they're all in the same intervention on different days or, but again, up to you. You can change the percent or the minutes that these individual students are here during this day. Okay, so I'm just here. And then participation. So maybe the student was here for 50 minutes and he was really only participating 75% of the time. This person did the full 30 and was present and participating 100% of the time. So you can change the participation. This student maybe prior time was here, but not participating at all. Okay, here you can also put in comments.
There are questions in the chat for you.
Oh, feel free to unmute and ask.
I have a couple of questions. So the first one, can students see their attendance progress?
Yes.
Okay.
In their student, in their portal.
Okay. The other question is, can we add artifacts to when we enter attendance? Is there a place for that somewhere?
So,
okay. Thank you.
No, I haven't seen that. So you can do comments, but not like PDFs or anything like that or pictures.
I had a quick question about deleting a student from an intervention. If I were to remove a student from this group, does it delete all of the data and all of the minutes that I had collected?
Yes, I believe so. So you could, I could check on that. You could put in a help ticket. And the help ticket for Performance Matters will go to your admins, but they can escalate it and it'll come to me. I can check on that. So you can click your students and then these are the actions. So when they're done with the intervention, you could remove it while the rest of your students are still continuing with the intervention. But I think it does remove all the data as well.
We're trying to figure that out because we're tracking minutes and trying to like keep our record. But if we remove a student, I didn't want to lose all of that information. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to share, I did try to, under student actions, just click on close intervention, and it didn't necessarily take out the minutes when I ran the report. The only thing I did is when you add like a new meeting, that student isn't visible anymore to you.
Okay, thank you.
So then their data will still be in reports, but they'll be removed from this intervention.
When we click close intervention,
Yeah, for that student. I think that might be the difference between removing and closing for that student. You could actually go to this question mark. So there's a lot in PM, right? So whichever tab you're in, you can click on the question mark and it'll take you directly there. So create intervention and it'll go through the features. Some of this is helpful. Some of it is a bit lacking. So click on the question mark and see what it has. I think the report is pretty helpful. So if you click on a report like scoreboard and you're wondering, well, why would I need it? You can see the primary users and the primary uses and even the guiding question, right? So if you wanted to review the guiding question and say, oh, this is exactly what I do. I want to compare the school teachers and courses on these state tests. Okay, so you can click on any of these reports. There's a lot here. There's also a My Report that might be helpful. They'll give you the users, the uses for this report, and then guiding question. I think the guiding question is helpful. It makes it clearer how this report can help you. Right, so I've added attendance here. So then you see the tab here. And then with attendance, there's a meeting marker and a participation. So I've seen teachers put the same minutes in participation and then all the points are on top of each other. You can't see it. When the points are different, then you can see the connection. But also, there'll be the history for that particular student in this intervention. So if there was history, you'll see it here, or you can add a comment. So maybe you're sitting down with a particular student and you're going over their scores and their attendance for this intervention. And then you might want to keep a record of what was discussed. So that's where you could do that. You can do a comment per data point, or you can do a comment in general. So maybe discussion over grades or whatever, right? So the students and the parents will be able to see this. So it's a good place to just keep a record of how you're interacting with your students. And then it'll be good for parenting. So you can get a summary of this report. I'll print out as a PDF. And these are the details of the intervention, the text that you've clicked for the intervention and the tracking tools. And they're but they could, well, really we're moving away from paper, so they could see this as well in the parent portal, in the student portal. You can also click in Excel. To the parent, and that will show the graphs. The warning, because the graph is not an Excel graph, it's just an image. The graphs are here. By interventions, you can duplicate this, make sure you save. You can change the permission, so maybe allow the admins to view. Admins can always view, I think. So reading is viewing, they could copy it, they could update this particular intervention, and if you give them admin rights, like another teacher or something, they can delete it if they have admin rights. I think that's pretty much everything. I'm gonna move over to baseball card. So as a teacher, you'll probably use student item analysis and baseball card the most. The dashboard is good. What we went over earlier is good for a quick summary. But baseball card is where you'll see, specifically baseball card, you'll see how your students perform across tests for your particular student. So if you wanted to filter, you can click on filter and that same window will open. And if you've saved any filters, it'll be there. You can click apply and then you'll only see those students. Okay, so I think this will be great for any virtual teachers who have multiple sections and you want to come. So you could look at common assessments, SLO district assessments. So I'm just going to go ahead and click. Maybe this one has unit tests 1, 2, and 3. And if you wanted to see how your students perform across those tests. If the tests have multiple sections, that's what will appear. So pay attention. Can you guys see this? Pay attention to what you're clicking. This test only has the one section. So if you click this, you'll see their scores. But if there are different sections, you could individually see the section. So it could be like a multiple choice section and a free response section. There's PE over PP, that's points earned over points possible for those standards. So you can look at individual standards, just the percent score for those standards. Test percentage is the percentage for the entire test, right? All the multiple sections combined, or the points earned. The points earned are the possible points. With the percentage, you'll see the performance bands. So again, the red is does not meet, yellow is approaching, green is the student meets that performance band, and blue is exceeding. So each test will probably have a different performance band. Go ahead and put all 3 of these on here. Here you're clicking the right ones. Oh, this third one, there's only 2 students. So maybe not the third one, maybe these 2. These 2 is fine. So you see some students didn't take the test. So you can click on the white square and click apply swatching. It'll filter out those students. So now those students are removed. Could do this further and click on unclick the red. So remove those students who did not meet. You have to click apply swatching for that to filter out those students. So now you don't see any students that did not meet scores, that performance band. You can toggle, order it according to this test. Okay, so baseball card is a good place to view how each students perform across. What else you can do is click the comparison chart. And some of you might use this. Maybe your admins might use it more.
Where did you click on that?
So, let me go back. This is comparison chart underneath baseball card. And what this is it'll correlate the scores across these 2 tests. It probably makes more sense. It depends on the subject. It probably makes more sense for like an NWEA scores where you want to see how the student perform through the years. But here in this case, this is a science unit 1 and unit 2. So for this particular case, unit 1 and unit 2 might not correlate well. It might be completely different standards. So there would be no correlation. But if you wanted to look at how your students perform across years, so maybe one of the, go ahead and click one of these. The comparison chart might make more sense. So let's look at NWEA science across years for your students. It'll help you project how your students will perform this year. So test percentile, again, so NWEA has lots of different types of scores. Okay, so you can click on the test date and see when the students took those tests, but I'm interested in, like, say, the test percentile. Fall 20, fall 21. Those two are fine. So I want to correlate these two tests for these students. So click comparison chart. And this has test percentile for fall 20 along the horizontal, and then 21 along the vertical. You can click the add the 45 degrees line, which is expectation, right? So if the student got a 60 on the 2020 test, they will get a 60 on the 2021 test, right? So this is the 45 degrees line, where you're assuming if a student got an 80, they would get an 80 next time, okay? This is a correlation chart. You want to see how well these two tests correlate. If they correlate perfectly, then all these points will fall on this line. So they sort of correlate, right? They're around this line. The more points, more data points, the better this data will be. And you can also show the regression line. And what that does is average all of these points along this line. So all of these points is having a pool against this linear regression. So this is basically the average of all your students who've taken these two tests. If you hover over the dots, you'll see the student and their scores on both tests. You can have both of the lines up here. That gives you an idea of how your students perform against expectation. So this one's a bit hard to see because the lines are so close. But what I have now up is the 45 degrees line, right? This is expectation. If you get a 40, you'll get a 40 again. If you get a 90, you'll get a 90 again, right? This is the line of expectation. And then the linear regression shows you how these students performed on that second test. And you can see your low performers here, right? These are your low performing students and these are your high performing students. Your low performing students only increased by a little bit. This line raised up. So what you want to see is for all of these to be higher, right? That's what we're trying to reach, for all of these students to perform higher overall. So that's what the linear regression kind of gives you a quick idea of how your students are doing across the board. Okay, what you can also do is maybe you're interested in filtering your students down to, maybe ethnicity, like Hispanics and Asian, because you're interested in their LEP indicators, right? So these ethnic groups, that's all you're seeing here. And then the second part here, so since I picked an ethnic group, maybe I'm interested in those students who have LEP indicators and those who don't out of those two ethnic groups. Give it a bit of time and you can see the two different colors on the same graph. The orange dots are students who have LEP indicators. The blue dots are the students who don't, out of this filter that you've generated. So I'm only looking at my Hispanic and Asian students, and I'm comparing those groups of students by those who have LEP indicators and those who don't. Most likely the ones who are indicated as LPs are getting some sort of interventions, right? So you can see your lower performing students in orange, which have LEP indicators, they perform a bit lower than the students who don't, those are the blue dots here, they're performing a bit higher. Okay, so these are your students who don't need those interventions, and the orange are the students who do. So this bottom attributes here is for you to compare those two attributes, and the top one is for to filter. Okay, so so I'm going to do this again and not filter anyone, and maybe I want to compare interventions. And here are the categories for interventions, but maybe I just want to do whether they have interventions or whether they don't, right? The student tracking is our own tool for intervention. So these tell you the students who have interventions in place in general versus those who don't. You click apply, and then those be colored as well. So this orange and blue sometimes switch. So you kind of have to check to make sure what is showing you. So the orange ones don't have interventions, the blue ones do, right? So you can see the lower performing students here are all blue, which have a student tracking. So these are the students who have an intervention, which they should, right? Because these are your lower performing students. So this might be a good way of, finding out which students don't and they're lower performing. Then the ones who are performing well that have interventions, maybe that's why they're performing well. Maybe those interventions are working. Any questions?
Was that on the baseball card thing that you got
Yes.
that?
Yeah, baseball card and then comparison chart. And then you can select out. So if there were more data points here, you could put all those tests here and then click comparison chart. And then you could, so if you have filters and you can toggle through those years. So let's just do intervention again. Scoring tool without, with an intervention, click up. Okay, then switch. I only have 2. So if you had others, like let's say here, it'll keep that comparison that you've created for those other tests. It might be good to click to have multiple years or multiple tests, set up what you want to view, and then click through them. The 45 degrees line is expected, right? So you kind of assume if a student made a 60 before, maybe they'll make a 60 again. But what we really want is for them to perform better. The linear regression, what we're looking for is to be above, not below. If those 2 tests are correlated, if they're meant to help your students perform on the next test. If they're not correlated, then this graph would be meaningless. It depends on the subject and the test that you're giving them. I mean, you could give them do nows and exit tickets and quizzes and see how your students perform on all these do nows and exit tickets and compare to a CBA at the end, right? That should be correlated. And then you guys asked about total interventions. So that's also in baseball cards. So again, you guys will probably use SIAs and baseball cards a lot. Oh, it's 1:50. We only have 10 minutes left. So you click on intervention and then after school tutorials, attendance. So meeting count, attendance rate, minutes, participation. So you can click all of that and you can see the summary total. So you could click on the white box, apply swatching, and it'll get rid of the students who don't have this data points. And this would be like 900 minutes that this student should have attended, but only attended 450 minutes of it.
Can I ask you a question about that? So are all interventionists required to put in their minutes that they're meeting with students?
I think that's determined by your campus, but I believe the answer is yes. So I just want to show SIA real quick. So reports, SIA, all look similar to what we covered already and on that summary. So click SIA, find a test that you're interested in analyzing, and then you can again filter by students, or sorry, let's find. So PM has a very whole child approach. So there might be tests here that aren't specific to what you teach, but you still see them because you have those students. Okay, so here's SIA, so similar to what we went over already. What you can see is your individual students, their test scores, their points possible. The interaction scores. So in this test, there's only one interaction per question. Some tests have multiple interactions, like multiple fill in the blanks per questions, and you'll see that under interaction score. You can your students perform. If you click on item score, that will narrow down per question. So in this test, there are 12 questions, and these are the many points your students receive for those questions. You could do this as a test review, a whole class test review, if you activate the demo mode, right? So I feel like this is fine for you to project for all your students to see, because then they don't see each other's names, but you could toggle, you know, by their performance per TEAG. So if you click on a TEAG, it'll show you the questions. So if you wanted to go over, this one, students did pretty well. So, you know, let's just say this is your lowest performing TEAGs. You click on it and you want to go over just those questions that your students perform low on. And then you can see that it's highlighted. You can preview. By clicking that play button, you can review it together as a group. And then if you click through, if it gives you 0 points, those are the wrong answers. The 1 point is the correct answer. Right, so this is a good place because PM's tests are very secure. So it's hard for you to print out the test and see the individual. They make it hard. Like you can see the individual test scores. If you click that play button over here, download report, but then you'll have to do it per student, right? Then it'll have the printout of the test for that particular student. And they just make it hard for you to do that. But it's there. You'll just have to do it individually per student. But I think this is useful for just do a whole class review of a question. And then you can click on this little graph circle as well. And then you can see how your students perform on this item versus how students in your school perform on this item versus your district. And this is a good way to select out maybe any kind of misconceptions, like if most of your student got the wrong answer, like this one's good, right? Most of your students got it right, so there's no point in reviewing that. Whereas this one might be a 50-50, this one might be worth reviewing. Was there a question?
I have a question because you know how we're tracking. I'm an interventionist in my campus, and you know how we're putting in the number of minutes whenever the students attend in our intervention class. But I have a problem. I have 2 students with the same name, you know, in performance matter, and then when I look at the ID number, none of them has the correct ID number of the student attending.
Yes. Yes.
And I look at Skyward, that's where I saw the ID number. That's why, but none of those 2 have the correct ID.
Yeah, PM isn't user friendly. You might want to find the student in their ID number here to select them out. PM has their own IDs. So
it's not the one in Skyward?
Because that's our ID. So it's just, yeah, PM generate their own ID so that
how would I know if that's the correct student? I mean,
oh, you can see it here. Find your student name and their ID here. So this student ID is the PM ID.
okay. So when I have to go to that item scores?
Yeah, or your student card. And click on your student card and you can see the student detail and it has their ID on there as well.
How
But
do I
yes.
go to the student card?
Go to Performance Matters, it'll take you back home. And then students, and then click on that student and there's the ID number here.
Oh, okay, I can type for the student's name, right?
You'll see those 2 students with the same name, but then you can check their schedule or, you know, something that makes them different. And see yeah, that's the same with PM's courses and sections. They have their own ID number that support uses. So that's how they use to help us. But we use a different ID number. So it's the integration problem is something that we'll have to solve to make this more user friendly. But right now, that's what we have.
Okay.
All right, so we have about 3 minutes. So if you have any other questions, let me know. If you have more questions, you can always email me or just put in a help
How
ticket.
do you put type paper test in?
I take a paper test.
If I take a paper test and I want to put it into Performance Matters.
So the the paper test will have to be created. So this your own teacher test? Or has it been created already?
It's already been created and it's in Performance Matters.
Okay, so
I
you
just need
do
to,
test center. And then you can limit to open test window. So these are all the active tests. So you can identify it by name. If you uncheck this, then you'll see all the tests in the past. So yeah, some of these tests are answer key only, but you just assign them to your students by doing OLA student admin or online scoring. So if they take a paper test and then you put their scores in, you can do it here. You select their answers. So if they've taken a paper test of this, and then you want to put it into PM because these items have TEKS associated with them and you want to do reports, you would put the answers here. You can score by student, you can score by item. So most likely if it's a paper-based test that the directors have created, you would go in and score it yourself per student. You would have to select out their answers.
what if it's a test that you created?
Okay, so then you'll have to create an answer key only test by doing new tests and then do answer key only. And then you can select how you want that answer key and how many items. Click OK, and then you pick your choices, correct answer, and then the standards. So you want to put in the standards so that you could run reports.
How do you add in the actual, what they're reading?
Oh, you could do test format and add a reference sheet and add it as a PDF here, if that's what you mean. And then here's also where you would set if you're adding a PDF though, it's not going to read it. You can't do a text to speech.
I had a question on the text to speech. Some of my team members they say they don't have it as an option. Can you show where that is?
Okay, so it has to be just like how you saw the director has to actually click those options to be visible. If they didn't, then it wouldn't be. But you could check by going to the test and clicking on preview. Actually, I am going to show one of mine.
So we don't have the option to give text to speech to our students. It has to be made from the people making the test.
Yes, but it might be just something they've overlooked. So you can just reach out to them and say, hey, can you activate this? Once it's activated though, all students will have that accommodation. Okay, so these are the tools that's available for this test, but this has to be determined when you create the test. Okay, you click next, start test, and a lot of students can't view. So you might want to tell them to go to accessibility, that's under their initial, and they can change the background here. Screen magnification is the problem. If it's too large, then they might not see the whole question, right? So you want to make sure it's normal, text to speech on, line focus is enabled, so then you can see it. And then when you click play, it will read it out to you.
Okay.
Please drag the groups of element identifiers.
And then you could zoom in on the questions.
Please drag the groups of element identifiers into the.
There's also.
Please drag the groups.
I had another question too. Sure. We see that, and we'll have to dig into that and just play with the tools. We had a problem with the very first Performance Matters assessment that we did, where the online scoring somehow wasn't allowing us to score any of their written pieces, and it made all of their answers wrong. So can you show us like specific tests to like their online scoring for their written pieces and how to access that so it doesn't count it wrong for them?
So like if something has a rubric, to online scoring. Do you know of a test that has a rubric?
Not really. We really have been so confused with this program, so where we've just, I guess, mentally avoided it.
The ELA comprehensive should have a rubric.
Yeah, so here's online scoring, score by item. These are the multiple choice. If there's a rubric, you'll see it here, and then you assign the score. So basically the same thing.
So maybe the assignment that we did that time, it didn't have that, because whenever I would click the online scoring, because I dug all kinds of that I could find about the online scoring and trying to get their answer choices, and it wouldn't give me the options to look through students like this. Like, it was just completely blank and it wouldn't allow it. So maybe it was just something wrong with the test itself.
Yeah, so it has to be enabled for you to online score. So if it's not enabled, you wouldn't be able to change their answers. And then for the rubric, you'll see the rubric show up here. You read through it and you select a score for each one. But that online scoring has to be enabled.
And so the people who are enabling this, so basically the people we have to ask to give accommodations to our kids or to allow us to do basically anything on this program, who are they? Do you know?
Probably the directors. You can always reach out to your coaches and they could locate the directors who create the test.
Okay.
Yeah, or your admins. Your admins or your coaches, they would be able to do it. And you're right, there's limited access because PM is made for secure tests. So you can't print out the test. They make it very difficult for you to do test reviews or retakes. Those are very difficult because everything's secure.
Dr. Wen. Dr. Wen.
Yes, there are questions?
Hi, sorry, this is Mr. Ramos. I was not able to log in through mine, so Ms. Salas had to forward me her section, but I'm not Janine. I'm Ruben Ramos.
Hi, Janine.
Hi. We were waiting on that last part, and so since the program is rather new to us, is there somewhere where we can do a tutorial just to get a slower version of how to enter a paper CVA into the program? Because we have to jump onto another training here at 2 o'clock. And so is there somewhere we can get a slower training of that last version we just covered?
Yes, I can certainly do this one again, more focus on what you guys want, or you can also put in a help ticket and I could help you on that particular issue. Your admins, it will go straight to your admins and your admins will just escalate it to me. Or you can send me an email.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Where can we find the video tutorials if we want to go back and look at some aspect of what you did today?
Yes, so I think the question mark is helpful. And if you go to news and assignments, video tutorials are here. And then I think the webinars are helpful because then they really show you from a teacher's perspective on how to do these things. The webinars are 30 minutes to an hour long, whereas tutorials are just the basics of each of these features.
Thank you.
Can you show me one more time how you got to the news and tutorials?
Yes, you can click Performance Matters to get you back to your dashboard. And then it's under News and Assignments, and they're here. This is also where if you're online scoring, if you have an assignment that you need to score, you'll see it at the bottom. So you can access online scoring at the bottom as well.